and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo del público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral. Que el cierre de brechas, que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to all member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, The Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo de lo público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to all member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. The new network of Caribbean SBDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SEDI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo del público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral. Que el cierre de brechas, que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces, nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
more than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
entiende bien lo que dice.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, The Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offer
permanent representatives, the Executive Secretariat, I want to thank all of you for your presence and participation in our session today for the Inter-American Council of Integral Development. I want to greet all of you and comment that I am chairing this in absence of Ambassador Yolanda Smith, the regular chair of this session, who for reasons out of her control is unable to be with us this morning. The Secretariat has told me that we have quorum, and I would ask the present delegations to move forward in alphabetical order. We will then take on whoever else enters later on. If we could please make reference to the list of delegations present.
Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, the United States, Jamaica, Mexico, Peru, República Dominicana, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, and Uruguay. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Kim. Con el quórum requerido.
Thank you very much, Kim. Having reached quorum, we can carry out the work of today. We'll move on to the first item on the order of business, and I submit to consideration of this commission the document CDOD 1702 Rev 1. I would like to invite anyone to make comments if they have any. There being no objections, the draft order of business is adopted. The first substantive order of the order of business for today is the report by the President of the Inter-American Agency for Cooperation and Development. I am honored to give the floor to my compatriot, Ms. Cara de Palma, the Director in El Salvador for ESCO, so that she can present the report of the IACD. Ma'am, you have the floor to present the report. Thank you very much, Chair. In my capacity as the head of the Directive Board for this section of the IACD, I am pleased to be able to give a presentation on this report concerning the most relevant sections and our achievements thus far. The IACD is the subsidiary body of the CD to create, coordinate, and administer and facilitate the planning and execution of programs, projects, and activities in the areas of the Charter for the OAS, and in particular in the framework of the strategic plan for partnership within CD. As you know, and given the provisions that standardize our work, there are certain actions that include administration, evaluation, and supervision of these partnership activities that are established within our strategic plan and our programs. Another function that we play is establishing cooperation relations with permanent observers, other states, and other international organizations that would be connected to international partnerships for development. We also look at the execution of solidarity projects and determine financing for them, always making sure that the resources made available to the IACD are used to meet the urgent needs of member states, particularly those with smaller economies and which are lesser developed. What were some of the activities that we were able to develop throughout 2021-2022? Well, we had the third specialized meeting of CD, of high authorities for solidarity or cooperation, which was held last year. This was virtual under the title Cooperation and Alliances for post-COVID economic initiatives. We had more than 230 representatives and 30 member states, including ministers of government, high authorities for cooperation, ambassadors, and representatives from other sectors as well. Throughout these 2 days of work, we were able to exchange with all participants with a view to obtaining concrete results through dialogue between the participants from different areas to identify the potential to improve national and political programs and promote regional cooperation, specifically with OAS. As a result, more than 20 member states made concrete offers for solidarity or cooperation identified that we saw at the conclusion of this meeting was the establishment of 3 working groups within the Directive Board to strengthen the role of the IACD and give it greater strategic visibility, and in order to respond to the needs of our countries and promote the work that includes a particular tool for solidarity moving forward. The working documents and the presentations and all the work done during the meeting are in the page 4 CD, and all this information can be found in the working documents. All of the projects undertaken as a part of the decisions made during this particular session led to a meeting on March 3rd of 2022. We elected authorities from the following those working groups. The chair also presented for consideration a proposal to guide and facilitate all the work that was mandated to all of them with different methodologies, procedures, some matters to be considered, and developed by the working groups themselves. The working groups would be composed in the following way. Working Group 1, the updated model for the ministerial process of CD and for the countries of cooperation in the region. Those countries were Uruguay as the chair, Brazil as co-chair, El Salvador, and Honduras. In Working Group 2, under theme Financing for Cooperation for Development in the framework of the OAS, SETI, the members were Belize as chair, Peru as co-chair, Bahamas, Bolivia, and Guatemala. And in Working Group 3, the role of the Inter-American Agency for Integral Development in the framework of international solidarity and development, we had Colombia as chair, Argentina as co-chair, Uruguay, and the Dominican Republic. The working groups worked very hard, coming together with the board and also individually. This was an effort that required teamwork to determine what the way forward was, making proposals and figuring out what the goals were going to be, to create working plans. These working plans were discussed, and within the framework of the board, there was an idea exchange amongst the delegations, participants, and authorities for cooperation in the countries, all aligned with the mandates and the overall goal of strengthening cooperation activities in the region. Here I want to highlight specifically the main role that the working groups played and the efforts undertaken throughout the preparation for this process. And as you know, there are also some activities of the board and the agency that is not representative necessarily of the countries themselves in order to promote administration of these activities for development, and that seeks to strengthen the capacities of the organization in order to have specialized knowledge in the areas of cooperation and partnership for development, and to capture technical assistance and resources from other member states and public and private sector organizations. Given these functions that do the board, we want to detail some administrative decisions that were taken during this time period. Among them, we have the approval of delivering the funds that were designated for scholarships and programs at the OAS within the budget program for 2022. We also sought to authorize the deposit for the training scholarships for 2021 from the 2021 that were not used pursuant to the provisions of the organization. We also agreed on proposal paragraphs in an addendum document, which will be discussed later, based on the discussions that were held in this session, with participation by working groups, delegations of member states, and partnership authorities. These paragraphs will be submitted to CD for their inclusion in the omnibus resolution for their consideration in the 52nd regular session of the General Assembly. As you know, there's also a development cooperation fund, which seeks to contribute to the funding of programs, projects, and cooperation activities that are national and, well, domestic and international in order to promote development, and they must be undertaken within the framework of the strategic plan. This particular provision also identifies the administrative funds for the General Secretariat in order to promote these efforts. The Fund for Development presented an update on the implementation of these programs for the 2021-2024 time period during the joint during the executive board session. This was presented, and this was an opportunity where we were able to invite other countries that had not yet done so to contribute to the fund so that they can benefit from it as well. Then we have the Inter-American Network of Cooperation, COPERANET, which I personally believe was one of the activities that over the last few months interested many member states and higher authorities on cooperation. The network is an online platform made by SETI that provides a space to create alliances between the member states of the OAS with experts in this particular area so that people can benefit from experiences in the area and technical assistance for their own development agendas. COPERANET responds or meets the needs of member states to facilitate multi-sectoral technical assistance to promote development and address the challenges seen in this region. This wouldn't be possible either without the team in charge of COPERANET, who I want to thank very much for giving so much assistance to the member states. COPERANET has 275 available assistance offers from Peru, Argentina, Uruguay, 11 from 2 development partners from the OAS as well. There are also 8 needs from 8 different countries aligned with execution plans within the framework of the fund. Periodically, we hold evaluations for the points of contact on the use of the platform, and as a result of that effort, we have created 7 singular accounts and other accounts as well, looking at the particular needs for cooperation by these member states. Additionally, we have the technical assistance section from CIVI, which will hold a session of, which will hold sessions through COPERANET, which is the platform for cooperation of the Americas during the end of 2022. This is to update everyone on these assistance efforts among member states and promote the creation of new alliances. These new offers will be proposed by the cooperation authorities for the first time. There is a webinar this week which might be of interest to you, where we'll have 3 very important actors providing information on the role of these authorities for cooperation, and also a certain degree of training. As a part of our new strategy for COPERANET, we have created some communications which will be given to the member states after August. This has information on the newest updates for the platform. This chair invited member states to participate in the platform and create these alliances that we need so much among our countries. We now also have the proposal of paragraphs to be included in the omnibus resolution of the city, proposing hemispheric activities in the area of integral development and promoting resilience in order to implement the work of the working plans and achieve our goals. The working groups developed some proposal paragraphs for the consideration of the General Assembly. These paragraphs were discussed broadly in each working group and in formal meetings of the board meeting itself. And as a result, we decided that we wanted to submit these paragraphs to SETI's consideration so that they would later be considered by the General Assembly. The proposal of paragraphs includes the participatory activities undertaken thus far, confirmed by cooperation authorities who had taken on the commitment to strengthen the Inter-American Agency for Cooperation and Development and thereby facilitate exchange and sharing of solidarity actions. As a result, these programs and the agency will be benefited greatly, including the Fund for Development and Copernet itself. The final result will be the development of our countries. In that regard, we are submitting for the consideration of this Council the paragraphs contained in the document for their inclusion in our strategic plan to promote development and to create alliances. I want to use this space as well to thank the Vice Chair, Mr. Amari Seydu Williams, the permanent joint representative and alternate for St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the United Nations, to the OAS and its member states for their support throughout this time period. I also want to highlight the work undertaken by the authorities for cooperation in each of the member states that made up these working groups for their contributions, and we hope that they will continue to promote this effort so that everyone in the AICD will continue to be present in all matters in this region. Similarly, I would like to thank the Executive Secretariat for integral development, especially Kim Osborne, Sandra Bournes, all these people who gave us so much assistance this whole time, and our permanent mission, our Ambassador Agustin and their team. Thank you so much.
Imprimió los trabajos de la Junta Directiva de la Agencia Interamericana durante el periodo que le ha correspondido presidir. Someto ahora a la consideración del Consejo el informe presentado.
Okay, I'm okay. So to be included in the strategic line, foster cooperation for development and the establishment of partnerships of the draft resolution promoting resilience contained in document AICD/JD/doc 20322 Rev 2. And according, I've been informed by Director De Palma, the 11 paragraphs have been agreed upon by the management board of the IACD. I give the floor to any delegations that would like to speak thereon at this time. I don't see any requests for the floor, and so CIDE takes note of the report and that CIDE approves the 11 paragraphs submitted by the Management Board of the Inter-American Agency to be included in the draft resolution, fostering initiatives in the hemisphere, promotion of resilience under the strategic line, foster cooperation and establishment of partnerships to be conveyed to the General Assembly at its 52nd regular session. Since there are no objections, it is hereby approved. I'd like to express my gratitude to CD and the members of the Management Board for taking very important steps to move forward in cooperation in the region. We thank the Chair and the member states that have made up the Management Board over the preceding period. Colleagues, the next item on the agenda is election of the members of the Management Board of the Inter-American Agency for Cooperation and Development, as is established in Article 7(2) of the agency statutes. The members of the Management Board of the IACD should be elected on an annual basis at a regular meeting of seating, which is held prior to the General Assembly. The Management Board is made up of 9 member states elected by CD, observing pursuant to Article 7 of the Statute of the Inter-American Agency, the criteria of rotation and geographic representation that is fair, and ensuring that no member state is excluded from an opportunity to be elected to serve on the Management Board, and that each region has an opportunity to be represented at all times. Pursuant to this provision, the Secretariat has reported that thus far, 5 candidacies have been received, all for re-election to fill the 5 vacancies on the Management Board. The candidacies that have been submitted were submitted by the delegations of Argentina, Mexico, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Brazil, and Ecuador. I'll offer the floor to the member states that wish to refer to this topic at this time. I see no request for the floor. Thus, since we have received 5 nominations for 5 vacancies, I propose to the members of this council that we proceed by acclamation of the election of Brazil and Ecuador and the re-election of Argentina, Mexico, St. Vincent and the Grenadines as members of the Management Board of the Inter-American Agency for Cooperation and Development for the period of 2022 to 2024. Thank you very much, colleagues. On behalf of this council, we congratulate the elected members and re-elected to make up the Management Board of the IACD for the period of 2022-2024. Pursuant to the rules of procedure of the Management Board, I request that each one of the member states elected report to the Secretariat the name of their principal and alternate representatives. Before we move on to item 3, I thank the Director and Chair of the Management Board of the Inter-American Council, Ms. De Palma, and we will continue with our agenda today. So now let's move on to item 3 on the agenda. These will be the reports of the committees. I am pleased to give the floor to the President of the Committee on Migratory Affairs, Ms. Ana Gabriela Vasquez Rivas Plata, alternate representative of Peru. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Chair of CIDE, Madam Executive Secretariat for Integral Development and colleagues, it's a pleasure to me to present the report of the activities carried out by the CAM for 2021-2022, which was circulated as CIDE CAM 108-22. With regard to the election of the authorities of the CAM, I must say that this commission was made up under the resolution called Strengthening Migration at the OAS, which was put forward by the CAM in 2012. In this period of 2021 to 2022, the Commission on Migratory Affairs was installed during the regular meeting of the city, which took place on the 25th of January of 2022. The date when it was elected, I was elected as by acclamation of the chair. This was held during the second meeting of this committee, which was held on February 22 of 2022, where Jacqueline Adriana Mel Garcia was alternate representative of Guatemala was elected. With regard to the activities carried out in 2021-2022, in the second meeting held on February 22nd of this year, CAM approved its work plan for the period document CIDE/CAM 102-22. This work plan's purpose was to address migratory matters in the Americas in a multidimensional way, with a rights approach covering the social and economic dimensions from a national perspective, regional perspective, with a gender perspective, trying to underscore the initiatives that were taken multilaterally through dialogue and cooperation and on behalf through international protection. The activities plan in this work plan were implemented in 6 thematic meetings which were held during this period. Thus, meetings with speakers of a high level on the following topics were held: migration in the Americas, dynamics, migration in North America, and migration in Central America and Mexico, migration in South America and the Caribbean. Migration governance and international processes and regional processes in migration towards development and an integral approach to migration. The CRM, the CSM, and the Quito process, and the RW, MIRPS, and COM. Also, another topic was migration, natural disasters, and climate change. Another topic was the role of local governments in receiving and integrating migrants. Next, the topic of prevention of racism and xenophobia and discrimination that is intersectional against migrants. And lastly, we address regularization and regular channels for the admission of migrants. We must point out that at all of these meetings, and as was committed at the beginning of the period of this chairmanship, we complied with a gender parity requirement in each one of the panels. We also must point out that each one of the conceptual notes that were put together by this chair with the invaluable support of the technical secretariat, as well as the audio recordings and presentations that were put on by the excellent speakers who were kind enough to take part in these meetings, are a very enriching source on the topic, on all the topics that I just listed. I must also point out that the fourth thematic meeting called Migration, Governance, International Mechanism and Regional Mechanisms in Migration Towards a Hemispheric Approach was particularly enriching for the work of this commission. In this regard, and before finishing the meeting, the chair and the delegates of the member states agreed to submit to CD a mandate to promote a dialogue space among these mechanisms and processes through an annual meeting in the framework of the ordinary meetings of this committee, so that each year follow-up meetings will be held for the purpose of contributing to improve migration, governance, and protection and international protection in the Americas. Furthermore, in compliance with a mandate to supervise that institutions of the inter-American system fulfill the goals that have been laid out for it through the program for the protection and promotion of the rights of migrants, including migrant workers and their families, the chair of CAM requested that the ICHR and the and PAHO and the Inter-American Commission of Women and the Inter-American Institute of Children to present reports about what they have done over the year to fulfill the objectives and goals of the program. This information will be reported as soon as possible to the member states in the report of the CAM chair about the follow-up process to this Inter-American plan. Lastly, in the framework of the CAM, in 4 meetings from the 1st to the 20th of September this year, the states of the OAS agreed upon several different paragraphs on migration and the strategic lines to foster promotion and protection of human rights of migrants, including migrant workers and their families, pursuant to the American program on the subject matter to bolster development potential. Thus, the CAM submits these paragraphs to the consideration of this Council to be included in the appropriate strategic line of the omnibus resolution of CD, to be considered at the 52nd regular General Assembly. Document CD/CAM number 116/22. Lastly, to express my gratitude, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Vice Chair of the CAM, Jacqueline Adriana Melgar Figueroa, alternate representative of Guatemala, for the support she's given, and all the delegations of the member states for their invaluable contributions in forging these paragraphs and in putting together the draft resolution of city. And thank you for your active participation in the different agencies that took part during the 2021-2022 period. Also, this chair especially thanks the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development and the Department of Social Inclusion of the Secretariat of Rights and Equity. which acts as the Secretariat and the Technical Secretariat of CAM, respectively, for its invaluable support as well. This chair is also thank you to Ms. Burns and Stella Diaz of the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development, Ms. Batilde Munoz, Alvaro Gotero, Calia Gonzalez, Sara Meneses, and Vanessa Salazar of the Secretariat for Access to Rights and Equity for your professional support to the CAM over the period of 2021-2022. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Chair, for the report and for the excellent work you have done that has been done by the Committee on Migratory Affairs and your leadership, and as you've mentioned, for the Vice President, Jacqueline Malguer, alternate representative of Guatemala. Before I give the floor to the delegations, I want to talk about the CAM report and the paragraphs proposed to be included in the strategic line fostering and promoting protection of human rights of migrant workers, including their families, in accordance with the Pan American program. This to bolster contribution to development. This is document CD CAM Doc 116/22 Rev 4. I also let you know, as Ms. Vasquez has said, that of the 16 paragraphs that were submitted by the CAM, 11 have been agreed upon by the majority of the member states. 3 paragraphs are still pending in agreement, and 2 paragraphs were agreed at a referendum of the delegation of the United States. Likewise, the delegation of Trinidad and Tobago has reservations about these 16 paragraphs. Given that most of the member states agreed with most of the paragraphs submitted by CAM, we will move on to consider them. We'll do that in an orderly fashion. And so for better ordering more properly our paragraphs, we'll look at the paragraphs that have agreement and the one with the reservations with the United States. Then we'll look at the 3. To begin this consideration, I've been suggested, in order to achieve consensus, the U.S. permanent mission sent in yesterday at 4 p.m. footnotes that it would like to include with these paragraphs, and the Secretariat understands that by including these footnotes, it will be expressing its reservation and allowing the consensus to get through from the rest of the states to be able to have greater clarification on this. I give the floor at this time to the permanent mission of the United States.
Thank you, Executive Secretary, and thank you, Secretary. Thanks to the Chair for getting us through this difficult negotiation. On paragraph 5, we're footnoting protecting the best interests of the child as a primary consideration. The United States is strongly committed to the protection of human rights of all persons, including migrants in the United States. While states have the sovereign right to control admission or entry to their territory and to regulate the admission and expulsion or removal of non-citizens, we recognize that states must respect the human rights of migrants, both children and adults. Consistent with their obligations under domestic and international law, including international human rights law, we recognize that Article 3 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC, provides that the best interests of the child shall be a primary consideration in all actions concerning children. While the United States is not a party to the CRC and therefore is not bound by the obligations therein, we do take into account the best interests of the child in a variety of contexts, including in the area of migration. However, the best interest of a child is one factor, not the only factor, in determinations by immigration judges and adjudicators. On paragraph 8, we are footnoting shared responsibility due to its placement in this paragraph. The United States supports and makes commitments for strengthening capacities, but does not have a blanket shared responsibility for developing other states' capacities. More broadly, states do have a shared responsibility for responding to refugees in the region, but the responsibility does not equate to responsibility for building other states' capacity. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias a la delegada de los Estados Unidos. La Secretaría.
Thank you very much, Delegate of the United States. The Secretary has taken note of the footnotes with regard to the specific areas of paragraphs 5 and 8, which would mean that the United States is joining the consensus on those paragraphs. So I submit to this, Carol, so the paragraphs agreed by COM at this time, which are the following: 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. If there are no objections, I propose to CD to take note of the report put forward by the chair of the CAM and approve all the paragraphs that were mentioned to be included in the draft resolution, and which is advancing hemispheric initiatives on integral development, promoting resilience. I don't see any requests for the floor. It is hereby approved. Let us move now to the pending paragraphs. As I was informed by the chair of the CAM, the member states have not been able to reach an agreement about paragraphs 3, 6, 9, and 9 of document CD/CAM/doc 116/22 Rev 4. An agreement is pending on these 3 paragraphs, awaiting consensus from the member states on the use of the expressions women in all of their diversity or all women. I offer at this time the floor to any delegations which like to talk about any of these 3 paragraphs. I must indicate that it is not the intent of the chair to open up the floor to broad discussion, which has been done on the committee, but I'd like to see whether we're ready to make a decision at this level. Otherwise, we will be making a decision to send these open paragraphs to the general committee in the context of the General Assembly. I offer the floor to any delegation that wishes to speak now. I see no request for the floor. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. The Ambassador of Canada is recognized at this time. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see each and every one of you here at this meeting.
I know this is an important topic, and I appreciate colleagues being with us this morning to discuss it. On the language that we have, and this is language, of course, that appears in this resolution and a second resolution that we'll be discussing this morning. I think debates have been useful. They've been detailed. And I think from the Canadian delegation's perspective, quite important, because the objective for us in the phrasing that we and others have promoted is to seek to be inclusive and to give visibility to women and girls who've been historically marginalized and underrepresented, Indigenous peoples, Afro-descendants, women belonging to the LGBTI community. So that's the substantive reason why this text is so important, Chair. And I know you don't want to have a long discussion about that. We can certainly have another time for that. My suggestion this morning, Chair, though, would be we do have language that's on the table. And I think we should do our best, if we can, to try to close the text, if it's possible, with the language that is on the table this morning. So I think my suggestion quite clearly would be that the CD adopt the text that appears, the text proposed by Canada plus a number of other sponsors. We have a tradition in this organization when there are some who are not able to go along with language to put in a footnote. So my proposal, Chair, would be that we proceed with the text that's on the table. I hope that my colleagues, who I know have views on this, but I hope they might be willing to accept that way forward as a way that we might proceed with this document this morning. And I'm happy to discuss further if that might be of assistance to you, Chair. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ambassador and friend, for your suggestion. We have this proposal on the table that Uruguay is now recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to each and every one of you. I just wanted to support the proposal put forward by Canada. We think it is timely. Uruguay agrees with proceeding in this way. Thank you very much. Thank you, Uruguay. Costa Rica, Alejandra, my dear Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Acting Chair, it's a pleasure to see you leading the work of this Council. And along the same lines of the delegation of Canada and the delegation of Uruguay, I would like to join in as Costa Rica to adopt the text as it stands in consideration of all the delegations. We know that this is a very important topic, but with regard to integral development and the populations in vulnerable situations, we feel that the wide majority of the delegations supports this text, and I would urge you as the ambassador to join in and to consider alternate methods to put forward their position and to join into the consensus today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ambassador, identify the United States to take the floor now, please.
States supports Canada's proposal.
Thank you very much. Paraguay, please. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to each and every one of you at the Council. Unfortunately, we cannot go along with the proposal of Canada, which, as we understand it, but it is, I can see here that there are very few states present, both virtually and in person, and so therefore we don't believe it's appropriate or fair that we should settle something that's so important, which showed quite a bit of, or stirred quite a bit of controversy, and we think it would be better to submit this to the next levels. Thank you very much, Paraguay. Guatemala is recognized at this time. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to everyone. Along the same lines as Paraguay, Guatemala is in the same, holds the same position. We cannot at this time agree upon this wording. We agree on the content of the paragraphs. We'd like to move forward on this important topic, but we believe also that since other delegations are not present, who were at the other meetings, they had similar positions. We believe that these paragraphs should remain open for the General Committee at the General Assembly. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Guatemala. Trinidad and Tobago is recognized at this time.
Trinidad, can you request the floor again?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Excellencies, colleagues. The delegation of Trinidad and Tobago takes the floor to join with our colleagues, distinguished colleagues who came before, namely the delegation of Paraguay and the delegation of Guatemala. We believe that these paragraphs should go to the General Committee, and we would support that. We cannot, at this point in time, agree with the paragraphs as is. And so we would be most grateful if it could be elevated for the consideration of the General Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I offer the floor to Brazil right now. Good morning, Chair. Good morning to each and every one of you. Brazil requested the floor to, just like Trinidad and Tobago, Guatemala, and Paraguay, Brazil would also like to put forward its position that we want these paragraphs to be elevated to the General Assembly because we don't believe that we're in a position to be able to close out these after this long sequel with so many informal meetings. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Brazil, Mexico is recognized at this time. Thank you very much, Chair. The government of Mexico would like to say at this meeting, put forward its support for the proposal by the delegation of Canada, and after making an effort to listen and be flexible to reach consensus, the government of Mexico has heard the concerns put forward by all of the delegations and would like to make a last-ditch effort to avoid having to send these open texts to the General Committee with a view to keeping so many provisions going to this committee, this body, because it's a very hard work to do. And so we'd like to put forward a last proposal. We hope that the delegations, all the delegations, could listen and consider it to use language that refers to all women and all girls, respecting and responding to the full diversity of the realities, situations, and conditions of vulnerability, which are in some cases are aggravated, and there's and manyfold. And so this is an attempt to reach a consensus to be able to close out this text today. And we submitted to the consideration of all the delegations to make an effort to be flexible and to reach consensus. And Chair, should this language not be accepted to close this out, and then we would
St. Lucia would like to add this voice to the other countries like Paraguay, Guatemala, Brazil, and Trinidad and Tobago. We cannot at this time accept this proposal by Canada. We believe this should go to the next level. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, San Vicente y la Granadina.
Thank you very much. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, please.
Chair, my delegation wishes to support Paraguay, Guatemala, Trinidad and Tobago, Brazil, and St. Lucia, and wishes to express that we cannot support the paragraphs as presented by Canada, and that we support that the drafts proceed to the General Committee for further consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, St. Vincent and Grenadines. I now identify the Ambassador of Canada. Please, you.
I've listened very carefully, not only to the colleagues' comments, but also to the comments of our colleague from Mexico, which we've taken good note of. But Chair, my view still remains the same. This is a formal meeting of this body. I think if it's at all possible, we should try to see if we can't agree on this text this morning. As I say, I think there is a fairly clear view amongst many states about the importance of this language. I understand there's still discussion and debate about it, but our view still remains the same, that the text that has been proposed by Canada and a number of other delegations, as referred to this morning, is the language that ought to be adopted by this body, with others placing a footnote if that's their desire. I just wanted to make that comment, Chair, and do our best to support you in your efforts to finish this task as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We do not have Mexico's text yet. However, I would like to express myself concerning some of the comments that we've received thus far. And of course, at the moment, we do not have any general consensus that would allow us to move forward and to make a decision to close these paragraphs. I recognize the Ambassador of Costa Rica. Alejandra, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. I simply want to express a brief point concerning procedures here. I believe that we are in a formal session, and this was opened with the necessary quorum. There are 18 delegations here, as our provisions require, and with that number of delegations present, we can adopt the paragraphs that have been proposed. We do not need to wait for all delegations, because this is a meeting that was announced with a lot of time beforehand, and we have quorum, so we are able to continue with adopting these documents. We can do that. And I also want to make an effort for delegations not to send so many documents up to the following level. Not all delegations who are looking at these matters will be there, and we cannot subject our authorities to discuss matters that are within the purview of this organization, things that we work on every single day, things that we negotiate. It's not something that I think those particular authorities should discuss when it really is the responsibility of this organization. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you so much, Ambassador. And that said, given what you have said, we do have quorum for decision-making moving forward, and that is what allowed us to begin this meeting. What the Chair does not find is any consensus. The consensus on the suggestion given by the delegation of Canada. There is an additional suggestion, textual suggestion by the delegation of Mexico that we have yet to receive, in which, which, if we want to do things correctly, we should submit for the consideration of the member states present here today from the Secretariat. And given that context, we do not have the adequate conditions to progress at this level. That means, given our rules of procedure, that if we do not arrive at a decision to close these 3 paragraphs, then we would be submitting them to the General Commission or Committee within the framework of the General Assembly for its consideration. I would like to ask the Secretary if we've received Mexico's text. We have yet to receive the textual suggestion. Canada's proposal at this time is not viable. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 delegations that have made comments saying that they are not prepared to move forward in this particular line. And in that regard, and in an effort not to extend this meeting, if there are no other suggestions currently on the table, I would propose to CEDI that these 3 paragraphs be submitted as they stand for consideration by the General Committee. Is there anything in that regard to be said, maybe concerning Mexico's comment? Thank you very much. The delegation of Mexico has sent the texts. We sent them through the platform chat, through the platform document function. We would like to support the comments delivered by our distinguished colleague from Costa Rica, and also the concerns expressed by the delegations that are here today, that we do want to close these texts and avoid overspill of work into the higher level. We would like to appeal to the consideration of all delegations to make an effort today so that we might close these texts with the perspective that we are all searching for consensus. And we ask that all the delegations who are here consider closing such text. This is to be done in good faith, and all the efforts undertaken thus far have allowed us to address this matter before sending it off. I want to thank everyone present here today for their consideration. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Mexico. I will now read Mexico's proposal and submit it to consideration by CEDI in order to determine if this is a viable option, one that would allow us to close these 3 paragraphs and have that inclusion. The proposal from Mexico says, in the relevant section, all women and girls respecting and responding to the full diversity of their identities, realities, situations, and conditions of vulnerability in multiple, aggravated, and simultaneous occasions or situations in which they find themselves. I'm reading it once again. All women and girls respecting and responding to the full diversity of their identities, realities, situations, and conditions of vulnerability in multiple, aggravated, and simultaneous situations that they may find themselves in. The proposal is to include this paragraph, which would substitute the two statements, women in all their diversity, or all women, both in paragraphs 3, 6, and 9. Is there any comment? I recognize Brazil. You have the floor. Good morning again, Chair. Thank you very much. Brazil, with a view to closing these paragraphs, because we do consider this to be incredibly important, as was expressed by the ambassadors of Canada and Costa Rica and other colleagues, we agree with the textual proposal by Mexico. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you so much, Brazil. Paraguay, please. Thank you, Chair. In Paraguay's opinion, we want to consult the proposing delegation of Mexico if it would be possible to eliminate the term identities. If possible, if we can eliminate that term, then we would be able to agree with Mexico's text in order to achieve consensus, as we've shown we want to achieve. Thank you, Paraguay. Mexico. Thank you very much, Chair, and we want to thank the Chair and all delegations for their consideration. In response to the question from our distinguished delegate of Paraguay, Mexico believes that the term identities is incredibly relevant to understanding the complexity and the challenges that all women and girls face. Understanding, of course, that the priorities and conditions in which we are negotiating at this forum do urge us to be flexible. We would be able to support this proposal without the word identities, if that means we would be able to close the texts today. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Mexico. I will then read what this text would sound like without the word identities in order to resubmit it for consideration. All women and all girls respecting and responding to the full diversity of their realities, situations, and conditions of vulnerability in multiple, aggravated, simultaneous situations that they find themselves in. I'll read it once again. All women and all girls respecting and responding to the full diversity of their realities, situations, and conditions of vulnerability in multiple, aggravated, and simultaneous conditions that they find themselves in. Any comment? Canada?
Morning. I just wanted to briefly take the floor because we're having a conversation on this text. We're very grateful to the delegation of Mexico for proposing the text. I would need a little bit of time, I think, to consult on the text, to be fair, before making a definitive view on it. I would say that I think the removal of the word identities would mean potentially that we are missing something important. But let me consult further, Chair, and return to you on this. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, embajador de Canadá.
Thank you very much to the Ambassador of Canada. I would like to propose that we move forward with the items on the order of business, and we can come back to this later on. For the presentation of the following report, I would like to give the floor to Michael Bullard, the alternate representative of the Bahamas, president of the Commission for Solidarity Development. President, you have the floor.
Executive Secretary Osborne and colleague member states. It is my great pleasure to provide a brief report on the work of the Committee on Partnership for Development Policies between June of this year to date, based on my submitted report, CD/CPD/doc.214/22. For context, Chair, during this Council's regular meeting held on April 26th, Ambassador Maria Fernanda Cortizo, alternate representative of Panama to the Organization of American States, was elected by acclamation as chair of the committee. During a committee meeting held on June 8th, I was elected as vice chair. On August 23rd, Ambassador Maria Fernanda Cortizo resigned from the chairmanship of the committee, and in accordance with the provisions of Article 61B of the Rules of Procedure for regular and special meetings of CD, as vice chair, I assumed the chairmanship of the committee. Chair, the committee held 9 formal meetings and 3 informal meetings since June. Over the course of the past few months, our committee received reports from the technical secretariats coordinating the work in the thematic areas of labor, tourism, education, sustainable development, and ports. The committee also received updates and took decisions related to the ongoing preparations for the 5th meeting of ministers and high authorities of social development. The committee further received a presentation from the Secretariat on revised general guidelines for sectoral ministerial processes in the framework of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development, and took a decision to revisit and review the proposal after the upcoming General Assembly. Chair, at the outset of negotiations of the draft CD Omnibus resolution in August, due to the limited time that was available to negotiations, the committee decided to delay the implementation of restructuring the Omnibus resolution to meet new guidelines regarding the creation of new mandates, costing, and the prioritization of mandates. The committee agreed to prioritize integration of modalities to give effect to these new mandates into the work of the committee after the upcoming General Assembly. Chair, I am pleased to advise that the committee concluded negotiations on the Omnibus draft resolution, advancing hemispheric initiatives on integral development, promoting resilience, document CD/CPD/doc.213/22 Rev 10, and member states agreed to all but 2 paragraphs, preambular paragraph 7 and operative paragraph 75. Chair, as we know it has been the case in other committees, the 2 pending texts could not be closed due to an inability to reach consensus in our committee on the use of the phrasing all women as opposed to women and girls in all their diversity. The committee has decided to submit the draft resolution with the pending text to this council for further deliberation in preparation for transmittal to the upcoming General Assembly. As I close, Chair, I would be remiss if I did not extend thanks to member states for their constructive and committed engagement during our negotiations, which helped make the negotiation process such a success. Here, I particularly would wish to thank the Secretariat for the stellar work done to support our deliberations, including the technical guidance provided, the interpretation services, and the exceptional coordination and general support provided by Committee Secretary Estela Diaz-Avalos. Chair, we carried out our work, I believe, quite efficiently and effectively, despite the resourcing challenges that limited the extent to which we could convene meetings with translation services. This is, of course, a symptom of the budgetary challenges which we know impair the organization more broadly, and we hope will be taken into account during deliberations around adequately resourcing our organization to carry out its work. With that, Chair, I submit the report of the work of our committee and our input for the CD Omnibus Resolution for the consideration of this Council. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, apreciado colega, por la presentación de su informe y desde luego.
Thank you so much, esteemed colleague, for presenting your report, and we want to thank you and Maria Fernanda Cortizo, the alternate representative for Panama, and all the representatives of the additional delegations. We want to thank you for your diligent work so that the work undertaken can be furthered without delay, and so that we can be prepared moving forward for the next General Assembly session. We also want to say thank you for your dedication. I want to give the floor to the delegation so that they can comment on the presentation given, and I would like to submit for consideration by this council the draft resolution promoting hemispheric initiatives in the area of integral development for the promotion of resilience. This is CPD/doc/213/2 Rev 10. In this document, as was mentioned by the President, there are two pending paragraphs, pending agreement by member states, and we are looking at preambular paragraph 7 and operative 75. Once again, the pending agreement has to do with the use of the phrase women in all their diversity and all women. The chair proposes, in order to save time for the delegations that are under consultations, that we leave this pending and we move forward in the order of business, and then we will come back momentarily to it. I see no objection to that method of proceeding. We will now move forward with the inter-American sessions at the ministerial level. This next session refers to the next 3 inter-American sessions at the interministerial level that the CD will be holding this during this half of the year. Then we have the Inter-American meeting for ministers and high authorities of culture. For this meeting, we need to consider the provisional list of observers, special guests, document CD/doc 636/22. In that regard, I would like to remind everyone that we have to look at Articles 17 and 18 for the sectoral and ministerial meetings of the CD. This provisional list requires prioritization within this meeting. I now would like to open the floor to delegations that would like to make comments on this document. There being no delegation that would like to make a comment in this regard, I propose that CD adopt the provisional list of observers and special guests for the 9th session of this meeting contained in document CD/doc/636/2, and that we instruct the Secretariat to proceed with the relevant invitations. There being no objection, it is so decided. Colleagues, in order to fulfill Article 14 of the regulation for these ministerial sectoral meetings of CD, we will now move on to establish the order of chairmanship that the delegations will have among member states and permanent observers for these high-level meetings. Allow me to remind you, as is said in Article 2 of the same regulation, and I quote, "Those who are at the head of additional delegations will be vice chairs for these meetings and will substitute the chair in their absence." Given the order for chairmanship in this regard, it says that pursuant to Article 14 of the above-mentioned article, the order for delegations will be established by the corresponding regular or special session of the CD following alphabetical order in Spanish after picking the first delegation at random. Then the permanent observers will be, their order will be established. We will now move on to randomly pick the first country. Okay, let's see. Thank you. First off, among the member states will be carried out by the delegation of Guyana. We will now draw the first permanent observer. Thank you. The first one is Serbia. We will now go on to the 11th session for Ministers of Education. We will now establish the order that delegations will chair this meeting, as well as the order for permanent observers during the 11th Inter-American Session for Ministers of Education. Articles 2 and 14 that had been mentioned previously also apply to this meeting. In that regard, we will now determine the order of chairing this session among member states. Now, among member states, the first name drawn has been that of Suriname. We will now draw the first permanent observer. Thank you very much. The first permanent observer will be Azerbaijan. We will now proceed to the meeting for social development, the fifth Minister and High Authority meeting for social development, which we will refer to as the fifth meeting of ministers and high authorities for social development. Delegations will remember that during the regular session of CD held on August 30th of 2022, addressing a request by the government of the Dominican Republic, which was hosting that session, the CD decided to change the dates for this meeting. And because it needs a particular resolution, we postponed that resolution until today. However, on September 20th of 2022, the permanent mission of the Dominican Republic, through a diplomatic note, informed the chair of CD, and I quote, that the government of the Dominican Republic has been able to make sure that this meeting will be held on the originally determined date pursuant to resolution CD/res /54, and requested CD to consider preserving the session for the fifth rentis as originally established from the 17th and 18th of from the 17th to the 18th of November of 2022. I'd like to open the floor in case any delegation would like to make a comment. I see no request for the floor. In that regard, then, I propose that CD adopt that the fifth meeting of ministers and high authorities for social development be held from November 17th to the 18th of 2022, pursuant to resolution CD/res 354 Rev 1. There being no objections, it is so decided. We will now move on to the next item on our order of business, which is the draft annual report of CD to the General Assembly. We will now move on to consider document CD/doc 362/22, which summarizes the work undertaken by CD during the monthly regular sessions, joint sessions with the Permanent Council, its sectoral meetings, and those of its subsidiary bodies during the time period between November of 2021 to September of 2022, and that of SETI between January to December of 2021. As is usually the case, we have a representative of CD at the General Assembly to do so. I would like to submit for your consideration our draft annual report, and I request that you consider that the Secretariat will adjust some minor details, because today we have at least finished our work for the next regular session for the General Assembly. I would like to consult delegations if there is any comment on the annual report of CD to the General Assembly. I see no request for the floor. In that regard, then, I propose that we adopt our annual report to the General Assembly on the work we've undertaken from November of 2001 to September of 2022. I see no objection. It is so adopted. We will now return to the items that remain pending. First off, the report by the President of CAM, and specifically the textual proposal that was submitted by the delegation of Mexico and the consideration of an amendment by the delegation of Paraguay to be submitted to delegations for consideration. I will read again the text that we are considering to substitute the areas where there is no agreement yet in paragraphs 3, 6, and 9, substituting the phrases women in all their diversity or all women. The text under consideration reads as follows: all women and all girls, respecting and responding to the full diversity of their realities, situations, and conditions of vulnerability in multiple aggravated and simultaneous occasions that they may find themselves in. Mexico has the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. The proposal put forward by Mexico is a proposal that is aimed to reach a consensus today and close out these texts with the Assembly coming up, which is designed to combat all types of discrimination. This is a principle of jus cogens. It's a principle that nobody can partially observe. The effort being made by the delegation of Mexico is huge. All delegations are aware of Mexico's position. We've heard over this time different delegations make comments on our proposal. Our interest is to be able to come up with language which would respect all women, their diversity, including in this language the aspects that we consider essential to be able to complete this in consonance with human rights obligations that all states of this organizations are bound by. We made an effort to eliminate the term identities. We understand that for many delegations that term is essential. We urge all delegations present here at this meeting to consider the wording proposed by Mexico without the term identities, and actually using identities because it covers characteristic identities of different people. Identity of a person has to do with their ethnic identity, their cultural identity, their religious identity, and many others that are recognized in international instrument of which we are signatories. We made an effort to be flexible, Chair, but we'd like to hear delegations that come up with a way to come to an agreement. If not, if there's no consummates, we would like to go with women in all of their diversity if this language we propose is not accepted. Thank you very much, Mexico. The chair understands that Mexico's proposal would remain, therefore, with the word identities. And thus, I would like to ask the delegations present at this meeting, Paraguay had requested that it be stricken. Now I give the floor to Paraguay. Thank you, Chair. In the case of Paraguay, we cannot accept the word entities that is being put back in by Mexico, because it's a term that does stir a lot of controversy, and it's not in our national legislation. A lot of controversy in domestically, and it's not in our national constitution either. And thus, we understand the principle of progressivity in terms of human rights, and we have to recognize the evolution of accepting these principles. We try by, and so a majority can never impose its opinion on a minority. This would be counterproductive. And so, once again, with regard to its proposal, Mexico's, we're open to continue to work with the Mexican delegate to come up with a wording language that is acceptable to all delegations of the organization. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paraguay. St. Lucia is recognized at this time.
Position remains the same. At the moment, we are awaiting feedback from Capital on the proposed text by Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you very much, St. Lucia. Guatemala is recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. We are grateful to the delegations, particularly Mexico, for coming up with a consensus language. This is what we all want, consensus language. In the same vein as Paraguay, though, we are able to support this proposal without the term identities. Identities was very heatedly discussed in meetings, and we would like to remove that term, and if so, we can move forward. We can go along with it. And so this reference that Mexico said, the proposal in of itself draws on the Medellin Declaration, which valuing the conditions in which women are in, and in a resolution of city and paragraph 13, this reference exists. This is consensus language. Guatemala proposed that we use this same language to be able to come to a felicitous conclusion with this on this discussion. But at this time, it would be the position of Guatemala that we need to elevate it to the General Committee, but we can go along with it if the word identities is removed. Thank you, Guatemala. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is recognized.
For its proposal in an effort to reach consensus. However, my delegation is still consulting, seeing that it is a new proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias, San Vicente. Guatemala nuevamente. ¿No? Okay.
In Guatemala, do you have anything to say? I have no consent. There's no consensus with regard to the proposal put forward by Mexico. Once again, I'd like to ask Mexico, having listened to the delegations that have spoken after it spoke, if he would keep its proposal as it stood. Mexico, you're recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. The Mexican delegation has received messages from some delegations, and it's not my intent to hamper this discussion, but we'd like to appeal to understanding of the Chair to give us a few minutes to find out whether we have a chance to reach an actual possibility of consensus to wrap up these discussion on this, or whether we are in a situation where we will have to withdraw our proposal. We will have a response within a couple of minutes. We are grateful for your understanding and also that of the other delegations. Yes, thank you, Mexico. Before I respond to your request, in response to the last four delegations who spoke, the chair understands that both Paraguay and Guatemala could accept the proposed language of Mexico without the reference to identities. What is not clear to me is whether St. Lucia and St. Vincent and the Grenadines could accept Mexico's proposal without the reference to identities. I'd like to know that, to be able to decide whether, in giving a few more minutes for consultations, we can close out these paragraphs. First St. Lucia and then St. Vincent and the Grenadines are recognized to respond to my question.
Santa Lucía, por favor.
St. Lucia, please.
And we are waiting feedback from our capital on the proposed text. Thank you.
Thank you very much, St. Vincent. Now.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Chile, please. Thank you, Chair. For Chile, it's very important to Chile, the concept of identity when it comes to gender. So we're very grateful for Mexico's proposal. We need a little more time to closely further examine this proposal, and we will then be able to. We would like to wait until we close this out because the Foreign Ministry of Chile is looking at the details of this proposal. To us, I must say, the concept of identity is very important, so we need a little bit more time. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chile. Trinidad and Tobago is recognized.
Thank you very much, Chair. My delegation takes the floor simply to advise that we also need to consult on this text, and I do not think we would get a response during the course of this meeting. So we are also going to be at referendum of the text proposed by Mexico. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Trinidad and Tobago. Since there are no further requests for the floor, allow me to make the following point. There's a proposal on the table. It was useful in helping to get closer to a consensus to be able to close out this discussion on this paragraph, but it's not enough yet. So, of course, the chair does understand that giving 15 or 20 minutes during this meeting won't be sufficient either, for the different delegations can actually complete their consultations and to be able to come up to a collective decision on this topic. So even though it's true that if we're not successful at bringing this paragraph to closure, if we don't reach a consensus, then it would have to be sent to the General Assembly and open for consideration by the General Committee. As you know, there's an intermediate step, is the Permanent Council. It could be sent to that will hear all of these reports, or take a look at these reports over the next day. So that will be the last opportunity for the delegations that still need to engage in consultations on this latest proposal may do so, and will at the last Permanent Council meeting will be able. It will be over the next days, during this week, and those three paragraphs would have to go in to the General Assembly open. It should at the Permanent Council no decision be made. So my proposal, that is the proposal of the chair, is to do exactly that. At this time, since we have not been successful at wrapping up these paragraphs, we will make the decision that they be sent to the General Assembly but with the understanding that over the next few days, there's a last stopgap measure, which is at the Permanent Council that could be looked at, and there the delegations can say whether they were able to complete their consultations with Capital to wrap up these paragraphs. I'd like to ask the delegations if everyone agrees with my decision. I don't see any requests for the floor. It is hereby agreed. And so this decision would apply both for the report of the CAM as well as the Committee on Partnership for Development Policies, where these issues arose. So let's move on to the last item on our agenda, which is other business. I give the floor to any delegation at this time which wishes to bring to the attention of this council any other matter. Since I don't see any requests for the floor, since there are no further matters to examine, I thank everyone for their participation and their kind cooperation, and this session is hereby adjourned.